Welcome to Slim Nation's One-on-One podcast with conversations featuring the host, James Slim Overton.
Well, welcome everyone to Slim Nation, the Slim Nation One-on-Ones podcast. I'm James Slim Overton, and I have a special guest here with me this morning. And I'm glad she agreed to come on. And as you know, if you watch the Slim Nation, I like to have I've had a lot of local authors on, and she happens to be one of them. But and she's, I hope I get the name right again because it doesn't stick with Sawama.
Swanya.
Swanya. Okay. Thank you, Swanya. I'm known to mess up people's names, but anyway, Swanya Latisha Branch-Morgan, and she's here with us this morning. And she explained to her, most people know her as Latisha or Tisha, but she will explain later on why she's going by her first name more so nowadays. But anyway, I'm glad. Good morning, by the way.
Good morning, Mr. Overton.
And thanks again for coming on. And we're going to talk about your books. But I want to tell people when I first met Tisha, I'm going to call her Tisha because that's what I know as, or Latisha. But uh, anyway, I first met her as coordinator for the National Night Out for the city of Portsmouth. And she had other duties, but that was a task that probably took all year to plan for because it was such a it involved the whole cities and all the civic leagues. So planning for that had to be something, I guess you would agree, but it was something that we all enjoyed and look forward to every year. And she was the coordinator for that and having to deal with the different personalities, some older folks, some younger folks, especially us older folks that were set in our ways and wanted to do certain things. And we always felt like we were in charge, but this young lady was actually in charge, but did a magnificent job year after year, creating entertainment and as well as sharing information that was important to our neighborhood. So that's how I knew her. She said first. That's how I met her. But now we're introducing her as an author, and she's been an author for a while. She's written two books so far. The one that's copyrighted in 2005, and one just recently, this year, 2024. And she'll talk about how long it took her to put these together, what motivated her to put these together, and Tisha, I've talked enough. I'll let you talk. Tell us a little bit. And I wanted to say, looking at the books, it's different writing styles for each book, but each one of them is telling your story, how you recalled it growing up. And a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this. And some people that don't relate to it, it sure would be a source of information that can help them in other areas of their life. So start with the differences in the writing styles of the book and what motivates you to put this pen to paper about your life, some things very personal.
Yes, very much so. Well, the first book, entitled Still Smiling Through the Storm, that was my first book, and that was a poetry book. And I started writing when I was in middle school. I started writing, and what happened was I used to write poetry because I was going through a lot. I was a student of IC Norcom High School, class of '92, and
Mhm.
I was I was a heavy set I was a heavy set, shy little girl, always wanted to be friends with everybody. And I found that relationships, period, were very hard for me. So, going through trauma, which all of us do, didn't know at the time that that's what it was. I had to get it out. So I started writing poetry. Didn't even know what it was. It was just writing on paper. And my aunt, who was my mother's younger sister, she was my best friend. So I would write it and I would give it to her because I really didn't think anybody wanted to hear it, see it, So she was the only person that I trusted with it. And I would give it to her after I wrote it. And I just felt like writing it would get the feelings out for me. And a lot of them, I will be honest, were very dark. And when she passed away, she used to always tell me, you know, you should put these in a book. You should publish them. I didn't know what that meant. But when she passed away, my uncle gave me the box that she kept, all my poems. And he said, your aunt told you need to publish these. You need to publish them. And that's when it sparked, maybe that's what I need to do. So I put them in a book. My mother helped me at the time. And we just decided to put it out there. It was no idea of what it would do, how it would help, just to put it out there. And once I started putting it out, I really started seeing how many other people were going through some of the things that I was going through, but never had an outlet, never thought about writing, never told anybody. And once I saw that it started to kind of bring a conversation up or help people, that's when I started pushing it. My mother and I both started pushing it. And like you said, Mr. Overton, my books are two different writing styles. The first one was poetry. This one is more or less in a biography style, but it tells stories. Each chapter is a story of a relationship. It doesn't have to be family. It can be romantic. It can be friendship, but some kind of relationship where I went through something and how I got through it. And the reason that I did the second book was basically because I started seeing more and more people going through things and not having an outlet or not having somebody that they felt like went through the same thing they went through. And because I was growing up going through things and did not feel like I had an outlet, I wanted people to understand how easy it is to get the help, because it is. We don't think we have a lot of resources, and a lot of times life be lifing, so your friends are not really there when you need them to be there. But I want everybody to understand that there is an outlet, there are resources, and that is my goal, to try to get that out there and to get those resources out there. My second book, to be honest with you, it was a long time from the first book. And it took me about 7 years to finish this book because I wanted to do it 7 years ago. And I started writing it. And I was just sharing with my husband once we got the book back that the reason that I stopped in the middle of writing the book is because when you're writing about different traumas, you relive them. Even though you've healed through them, you think you've healed through them. Healing is a process, and healing is an ongoing process. So I try to share with people that you can never just completely say, oh, I'm healed from that. That's never coming back, because triggers happen. So once I started writing the book, I think I got through the third chapter, and that chapter just set me back. It was a bunch of emotions. It was a bunch of feeling all over again. So I had to go back and start the healing process on that again. I had to go through healing, counseling, prayer, everything to even begin to start writing again. So writing is a process. And I've had a couple of authors come up to me who want to publish, and they have said, you know, it's taken me so long. And I tell them, it's worth the wait. Trust me. Because if you want to get it out right, if you want to be effective, you have to let the process take its time. And that's with anything that's worth it. So the 6 years, it was a long time, but it was worth it. It was definitely worth it.
Yes, to teach you, I'm going through that now. I'm writing my story, and I have those periods where I really can write, and then I have those periods where I have to sort of sit back, because it's sometimes in there that you have forgotten. There's some things you forget until you start going into your memory banks and trying to bring up certain parts of your life, and then everything comes up. The good and the bad. So, and I think it was your goal to share either way, the good and the bad, as being therapeutic for you to say it out loud. But I want to go right back to the first book for a second, because
Mhm.
it's interesting to me how you form, you know, different things in your life, like a girl's best friend, love addiction, and things like that that a lot of people go through, and you put it in the form of little poetry, short poetries. And what I mean, was that just a natural ability you had, or I know you said your mother helped you with some things and she kept everything, and thank God she did that, because it might have been one of those things, that you might get lost in your moving around and
Mhm.
everything, and just not thinking about it. But what, I mean, how did you have that, you know, that bandwidth to even put it in the form of poetry, and really explaining, that it was true? So some poets write about ideas and dreams that they have, and things that they imagine. You're putting your life experiences in the form of a bunch of little poems, So what I'm asking, was that a natural ability? It just came to you naturally, or was it a part of some kind of training,
To
later
be
on?
well, to be honest with you, Mr. Overton, it was never something I was trained to do. I do believe that God gives you what you need to get through what you have to get through.
Right.
And at that time, I didn't have anything else. I didn't have that friend I could go to and tell everything. I had my mother and my father, but let me preface this by saying my first book, when I put it out and I started doing book signings, the one thing that I would tell people before they bought my book is, because I used to have kids come and want to buy my book because I was younger. And I used to tell their parent, you can buy it for them, but read it first.
Mhm.
Because the one thing I don't believe in is sugarcoating things or keeping things secret. That is the worst thing that we do to ourselves and our families, is keeping things a secret. It does not help anyone. So when I wrote the book, I knew that a lot of the poetry was dark. I knew that a lot of poetry would trigger questions, because and I'm very open about what has happened in my life. I have been I have had 3 rapes in my life. I have had 5 miscarriages in my life. I have been sexually assaulted, all of that. And I've made it through that.
Mhm.
So that is why I said, when I wrote the first book, there were things I just needed to get out. I did not at that age have the opportunity to be told, oh, you can go to therapy, you can go to counseling. I didn't know what that was. And most people weren't telling children that at that time. So I had to get it out. So I felt like that was an outlet God gave me to just write. And it started, some of it rhymed, some of it didn't. So
All poetry doesn't have to rhyme.
exactly. So that's why I said I did not have that training. I didn't know that some poetry didn't rhyme. I didn't
Mhm.
know that, all of it could be the way you want it to be. But that is all a part of art. So in order for me to get it out, that's the way that I did it. And it's funny, because most people say, if you've ever heard people say Mary J. Blige made the best music when she was in pain,
Mhm.
that's the way I felt. I felt like when I was in pain, I did my most poetry. That's what came from me. But throughout my healing process, it was more of education, it was more of storytelling to get that part out. But the poetry, even now, there are times that people will call me and say, "Can you write a poem for this?" And if I can get in that mode, then I can write it. But poetry is not just something I can sit down and pen a poem right now. That has to be something that I feel.
Yeah, I always wondered about the Maya Angelou, where people were always coming to her, even the president of the United States. Can you write a poem for my inauguration? Inauguration, and and she has to pull from that, but years of experience. But I'm sure even she sometimes said, "Well, I have to, give me time. I have to be
Yeah.
in." But some people think she could just pull it out of her head at any time. But a lot of her poet came from experiences she had. as a young child. And I think it's so good that you mentioned about to parents about if you're going to share this with your children, read it first, because it might be, even though you read it first and see some really painful poems in there or hard poems in there, it might be what that child needs. Children are on different levels of of maturity, and sometimes your parents, and sometimes you might not be the best communicator, as far as getting a point over or trying to communicate with your child, but you might find something that they can read that will help them along with whatever you can help them with. So I think it's very important. Thanks for letting the parents know that, so that the kids just wouldn't pick it up and go through it and not be prepared for it, because not every child is prepared for some things, the hard truth.
Absolutely. And I give that disclaimer with anything that I write. And I say that only because I write in honesty and I write in truth.
Mm-hmm.
I do not do a lot of sugarcoating. And anybody that ever meets me, ever is in contact with me, knows that that is not the way I operate. Because like I said before, we do a lot of secrets. We do a lot of walking around concealing and hiding things. And that has been something, even through my second book, that's what I honed in on a lot of. Because in the beginning of my life, there were a lot of secrets. My family loved them to death. My family was amazing. I had a very close-knit family, but growing up, a lot of secrets were uncovered. And I was the type of child that was like, why didn't you just tell me?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I don't believe in that. I just don't believe in that.
Yeah, going through your second book, I kind of related to you with some of the things you were saying about secret, because I kind of went through that myself. And I talked about this, and it's going to be a part of my book, just a part of my book, of being adopted and not knowing that I was adopted until I was like 21 years old. And when I found out, I was kind of bitter at first. And why wouldn't someone, and then finding out everybody in the neighborhood knew, everybody in my family knew. Well, most people did. And some people at school did, and some people at school was just as surprised as I was, high school, because my dad and I were about the same height. But and then as I got older, I said, well, some parents look at children and they kind of figure on their own what they think the child can take, and so they hold back on certain things because they say, well, he's not ready to hear this. So a lot of things that went on in my family with family members, I would be the one that was sort of sheltered from that news. But I could take it, but they didn't think I could, so they held back. So I felt a connection with you reading that part about being a little bitter, or say, why are you holding that back from me? I mean, I need to, because it kind of affected me. I believe when I got to the college stage in my life, a lot of my schoolmates around me were far more advanced as far as dealing with life than I was. And
Yes.
I knew it was because, some things I was sheltered from that they were experiencing.
Yes.
So when I got to college, I was like the most naive guy. I probably wasn't the only one. There probably was a lot of us there. But the crowd I was hanging around with, I was the most naive. I mean, they'd be talking about things, I'll be, and it was something that they learned, before they even got to college. So I'm just saying that's where I related with you. So, how did, as time went on and you found out more and more, and you talk about it in the book, not going too deep into the book, but basically you were kind of upset, at first.
Well, I was and I speak a lot on what people call generational curses. I don't call them generational curses. I just call them generational patterns, because one thing about it, everything can be broken. It's just who's going to break it. And I decided when my mother got sick, I decided to start myself breaking all of that. When my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, she actually, and that's one reason why I do a lot of the charity work and things that I do, because when my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, it was a year after she was supposed to take her breast exam. And she forewent her breast exam because we were taking care of her sister who was going through cancer at the time. So she put hers off because we were taking care of her. And when she finally went in to get her breast exam, she was stage 4. And when she went in to get it, I wasn't with her at the time. She came back and told me they had seen a lump. You know, they said she had breast cancer. They're just going to start a little treatment. And she made it so minor to me. At the time, I was in my 20s, early 20s, didn't think anything of it.
But it was really major.
Right. And I was just, it didn't dawn on me until the 3rd appointment I went with her. And the doctor said, when he said stage 4, she kind of looked at me, I looked at her. And immediately in the doctor's office, I looked at him and I said, I'm her daughter. I'm going to be bringing her to appointments. So if I call you, I want the information that you give her. And when we left the doctor's appointment, she and I had a conversation. And I told her, I said, I don't know why you didn't tell me. I'm upset, but I don't need you to shield me. And I have been shielded my entire life. And my mother's thing was, I just want to make sure you're okay. I want to protect you. But what I tell parents now, you cannot protect anyone by keeping things from them. That doesn't protect your children. It doesn't, because it does not equip them to do what they need to do when something happens. You have to talk. Nobody says you have to give in intimate details. Nobody says you have to be, so explicit with things, but you have to inform people of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And that's been my biggest thing with anybody that's in my circle, in my family. When you keep things from me, that's when I get upset. If you just tell me what it is, we can work it out.
Yeah, that's indeed a thing. And again, the more you talk about it, the more I feel the experience that I had too. But, when you get down to the two dad thing, and I still don't want to go too much into the book, but, that was an issue too, because, all those years you think it, the person that held that position in your life was the dad you knew. And then finding out that you had another dad out there, and then and hope this doesn't expose too much, but then having the birthright dad walking up on your job and saying, because I had a kind of experience. One of my brothers just came up to my house one day and said, "Hey, I'm your brother." And after getting off the floor from Fame, I had to deal with it. So yeah, So how was that experience? Well, you knew about him. It wasn't like all of a sudden he walked up. You knew about he was out there, but you weren't expecting him to come on your job.
That was actually another secret that again, I immediately went to my mom about, and I was just like, you just got to talk to me, because growing up, the father that I grew up with, that was my daddy. That was my daddy. Mm-hmm. And he raised me. He will always be my daddy. And it was never a point of me being angry because he wasn't my biological father. I was more angry because nobody just told me, I think, and the conversation I had with my mother, God rest her soul, we were very honest with each other. And she knows that I'm very transparent. So I'm not saying anything she wouldn't approve of. But I told her when I found out, I said, Mom, people have been having relationships in and out of wedlock for years. I'm not God. I'm no judge or jury for anybody. So I would have never judged her for that, or him. But it was the whole dynamic of the relationship. And the reason that I put it out there is because we have so much of that going on right now, where people have babies in a marriage. They keep the child a secret. The other parent doesn't want them to have any communication. All you're doing is scarring these children. These children that are out here angry, running around here, robbing people, killing people because they have so much anger. When you hold that from them and they have to find it out on the street or from somebody that they don't even care for, that's what you're doing to them. So
that's why they're acting out,
Exactly. They had no other thing. They don't want to be mad at the parents because they love them. So they get mad with everybody else. And when I found out, the bad thing about it was when I found out that my father was not my father, it was because his mother and my mother didn't like each other. So it ended up being kind of told to me as well, he ain't your daddy anyway. And I was just like, okay. And when I found out, all I wanted to know was who was he and why wasn't he here? Because even if he didn't raise me, you can still be present. And when I found out that his wife was the reason that he could not be in my life, that was not okay with me. When I met him, the only thing I wanted from him was an answer. Why? Why did you choose everybody else over me? And with any child that has either a parent has walked away or a parent has, gotten married and had no connection with them, a child's question is always going to be why, because you always put that on yourself as the child. What did I do to make them leave? Did they really not love me? Did they really not want me? So when you're doing this, when you're walking away and thinking, I'll get my life together and then I'll come back in their life. When you intentionally do that, now there are other circumstances. When a parent doesn't tell another parent they have a child, that's completely different. But when you know about that child and you intentionally stay away because of someone else, you are doing more damage to that child than anything.
Well, I have a question for you, but before we move on, I want everybody, because I want you to say this, and then at the end you'll say it again. Tell everybody how they can get your books. Both of them.
Well, you can go to my website, which is Healing, HEALING, through THRU and another U. So it's 2 U's on the end, healingthroughyou.org.
Okay, and if you want a personal signed copy, like I have, which makes me feel special. See?
Yes.
And here's the first book, and both of my copies are signed. And I want to get to this too. The illustration on the second book. I don't know if people can really see that.
Yes.
Let's see. But anyway, we'll talk about that. But I wanted to ask you, going through that, it had to create some kind of emotional anguish in you. And then on top of that, you mentioned about the miscarriages, which came later, and then the physical issues that you had. And you couple all that together because you never really forget about all those things emotionally that affected you, because that's going to always be a part of your life, because some things you just can't help coming back into your mind, as far as you try to push it back.
Right.
Some people are successful in doing that, but I don't think that's healthy, pushing something completely out of your mind like it didn't happen. So how did you navigate through the physical, the medical situations you had, and then the emotional things were always there? That's enough to run people off a cliff. How did you navigate all that? And did the books help?
Well, there's only one way, which was God. There was only one way, because through everything, through the rapes, and it's ironic that you just said it will run you off a cliff, because I have, in the midst of everything, I have had 3 suicide attempts. Wow. And it started from middle school. And I shared that only because we have so much suicide going on right now. Mm-hmm. And everybody,
and people will be surprised at the ages that the studies show that that children are taking their own lives. You know,
absolutely.
At a point when you think, what are they worried about?
Right. And what we do is we put the blame on the victim. We say, you know, why did they do this to their family? Why did they do this? If you have never attempted suicide, I mean, really attempted, you would never know, because you get to a point where you go, enough is enough. And the reason that I said the only thing that got me through was God was because I was almost out of here twice. I should have been.
What saved you from, you know, I know you said God, but what was it, a actual person, or you coming to come to Jesus moment? I mean, what saved you from those attempts?
The very first time, it was a person. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how that person showed up in time, because I did not call anybody. Nobody knew. And because I went through depression for so long, my depression was diagnosed in middle school. That's how young I was, before I even went to Norcom. So I was going through depression already. And what my doctor told my mother was, she is a functioning depressed person. And it didn't make sense to me, because my mother and I were like, what does that mean? And she said, what it means is she can get up, go to school, function all day, do her work, come home. And what I would do was come home, do my homework, and go to sleep. And on the weekends, I would sleep from Friday to Sunday, because that was my shutdown mode. That was I want everything to disappear. I don't want to feel anything. So I would come home, I would take NyQuil, and I would sleep the entire weekend. And that's why I say,
and wake up to the same thing.
Wake up to the same thing. And it would get me through. I would get up Sunday morning, go to church with my mother, do what I had to do, come home, go back to sleep until I had to go to school the next day. And just like my entire work life, I have always, up until I would say my late 30s, I suffered depression terribly. And I did everything I could to get through a day so that I could get home and get to sleep. And that's how I survived that.
Were you going through the physical issues then at the same time?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, this was
and what I had to
before
do,
or after the rapes?
The rapes?
I mean, well, that too. But the car, you said car crashes?
No, suicide and rape. That was.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And what happened was, everything that I was going through, it was a buildup. And I started going to therapy right after my mother passed, in 2020. After she passed, that was the last time that I had any kind of attempt on my life, anything, because I wanted to go. My mother was my best friend. My mother was my sole supporter. My mother was everything at that point. And when I lost her, I was still taking care of 3 children and my aunt. So I had to function for them. And everything was going almost like a whirlwind, because I didn't know what to do. I had just lost the only person that supported me, because she and I had custody of 3 children, my nieces and nephews. So we did everything together. And when I lost her, I started going to therapy. My therapist said one thing to me that made so much sense. She said, everything that you've been going through, I'm going to give you this analogy. Your body is like a computer. When you keep putting things in it and pushing it down, what does it do? It crashes.
Yeah.
She said, you are crashing. You are about to completely burn yourself out. And at that point, it was like an aha moment. It was like God just showed him and said, this is not what we're going to do. And I completely said, I have to save me. Nobody else is here. My mother is gone. I have to save me. And that's when I started writing again, but it wasn't in poetry form. It was just saying what I wanted to say to everybody. You know, the anger that I had towards my dad. The truth. Yes, the anger I had towards my dad, everybody who had ever violated me. And at that point, I just wanted to almost expose everybody. But growing up, you learn how to do things better. And it wasn't about exposing them. It was about exposing the situations that happen so that they won't happen to other people, or so other people will be educated to know if this is happening, these are your options. There's a way out.
Wow. And I want to tell the people watching, you know, it's good to have these conversations like this, although we're here to, you know, promote your book and the book signing's coming up. You're going to talk about that. But also, you know, I guess a lot of people over the years, we say, well, I'll just go to church and talk to my pastor. And that's good, too. But you got to couple that with a therapist, you know, somebody that's professional, somebody who studies human behavior, you know, and just put all of that together, like talking to a best friend or just talking like you're doing there. That's always good to get it out. But you have to couple that with professional help, you know, and a lot of ways, that's the only way. And that's something that was a stigma in the African American communities. Nobody wanted to admit that they needed help or they had family members that needed that kind of professional help. But that's changing now. A lot of people are realizing they have to get help, you know.
It's changing, Mr. Overton,
but it's still not there completely.
Right. It's not changing fast enough, and it's not changing.
We're still
it's
losing
not changing quick enough for me. Let me say that. And that's one reason why you know, my Healing Through You initiative that my husband and I started is basically just that. We do sessions where I coach through the healing process. We have sessions where even couples can come over, we sit and we talk. And a lot of times that's all you need. And I said that because growing up, I had friends. I didn't have friends that could show up the way I needed them to show up. I'll tell anybody, I'm a very hands-on person. I'm a very face-to-face person. And it's difficult for me when I have friends that are so far. Like right now, I have two best friends. Both of them don't live anywhere near me. So it's very hard for me. We can have conversations on the phone, which is great. But I like having that you come sit. Right. You sit on the couch and we just have it. Because growing up, my best friend who's in Richmond right now, she lived directly around the corner from me. We would walk to each other's house in our pajamas, just sit on the bed and talk for hours. That is how I grew up. So as an adult, I miss that. So that's why I have the space now where I invite people that just want to come and talk. We can talk it out. And that's where the resources come in. If we're talking, I sense something that you need, or you need a resource you can't find. That's what we do. We help do that. I am working on Healing Through You being a nonprofit. I'm working through that process now, because what we would like to do is be able to help people pay for therapy. We would be able to help people pay for other resources that they need, because that I have found is a lot of reason why people don't do it. Yes,
and sometimes the insurance company will pay for only so many sessions.
Absolutely.
And it's always short of the amount of sessions that you might actually need.
Absolutely. So, and what you do is They offer 5. Like for us, when I worked for Portsmouth, they used to offer us EAP, and they would offer us 5 free sessions. I used EAP numerous times, and I would get through those 5 sessions. And then when they want to see you twice a week and you have to pay for it, you can't really afford that.
Yeah.
So people stop the sessions, and then their healing stops.
And you're right back where you were. And as we're getting close to the hour, I want you saw me put up this book of the illustration there, which is you on there. And it's in the book talking about, this illustration. Just talk briefly about, because a lot of people, women and men in some cases, go through that. So
Absolutely.
tell us, and the name of the book is Scars That Made Me.
Yes.
And it shows the two sides. It shows a side of you perfectly okay, and the other side, really been abused.
Really bad. Yes.
Really badly and abused.
Ironically enough, that cover was designed by my husband. When I told him what title I wanted, when I told him how I wanted the cover to look, my husband is our graphic designer, and he actually took the picture of me and then he formulated the other side the way that I wanted it to look. And the idea behind it was I wanted people to see that, for one, we walk around every day in a mask. How many people come to work? How many people go to church, go to school, and they've been beat up right before they left the house? We get that every single day. There are people that we encounter every day that have been in some violent situation before they've come in contact with you, but they may have put on makeup. They may have done anything to cover those scars. So what I did was I wanted you to see that the scars that I had are no longer the scars that I have. So that other side is me today.
Yes.
The battered side is the side when I was going through all of that, whether it was the physical, mental, emotional abuse, all of that was how that was. And that is no longer the case.
Yeah, and I can say that's when people see the book, a lot of times when you're an author and you have books, you want to be able to move, because it's numerous books that might be on the shelf or in the bookstore. And the first thing you want to do, just like if you're selling a house, it has to have that curb appeal. You have to draw in people, and a lot of times, illustrations like this will draw people in. And I want to tell people the whole book is not about domestic abuse, but it's a very important part of it, of the healing and everything else that went along, because not everybody lives their whole life in that, but even if it's a short period of their life, it's something that affects them, dramatically throughout the rest of their life. So it's important that you put that on the front of the book to help draw people in and get a chance to see exactly what you just explained. So and
I intentionally, inside the book, I intentionally did not put a lot of pictures. I did put pictures of me and my parents. And there's a picture of me and my husband. And it's a process through it all. And I think there's a picture in there when we first got pregnant, because I was determined, this is my second marriage. My father died in my presence. My mother died in my presence. And my first husband died in my presence. So to have to deal with all of that and still, take care of family, take care of home, and still be the person that you are, stand upright, hold a job. It's not easy, but I want people to understand that it can be done. We go around a lot saying, I went through this, so it's hard for me to do this, or I can't do this. You can do anything you put your mind to. You can do anything, especially with God, you can do anything. So I just want people to understand that there is a way. and I'm here to help if I can help.
Well, Latisha, I usually near the end, I ask my guests to make a final statement, and you just did that, sort of to summarize, their purpose for coming on and for writing the book. And you just did that very well. And I appreciate you. And before we go off, I want you one more time to let people know how to purchase your book.
You can go to my website, which is healing, HEALING, through THRU and another U. So it's Healing Through You. And I will be having my book launch August the 10th at 1 p.m., 1824 West Queen Street in Hampton. And through my website, you can get merchandise. You can get either one of my books. You can book me for speaking events, book signings, anything. All of that can go right through my website.
Yeah, and I definitely want you to come back to talk more about the program that you and your husband are doing together. And
absolutely.
So, and you mentioned your husband now, and you all work together beautifully. So the things are going well now with you. I'm glad to say, and you still have some physical moments that are challenging. Yeah. But you wouldn't know it looking at you now with your smile. You are an amazing woman, and I appreciate you. And even a great writer too. I think I encourage people to purchase both books. The one that was written in 2005, which has some great poetry in there that's relatable as well, and the latest book, The Scars That Made Me. And the first book is Still Smiling Through the Storm. I think all of us can relate with that, but some of us are not smiling. So, sometimes you need a little something to give you that push. And I really appreciate you. And I want to, again, tell everybody that's watching to share this show. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook Live, to make sure the people that didn't get up this early to watch it live, make sure that they get an opportunity to see this show. I think you really appreciate what Tisha had to say. It's very encouraging, and I know it's somebody out there going through the same thing. So,
absolutely.
And make sure if you are going through the same thing and you need help, don't hesitate to get help through professional clinicians or your pastor or your friends, but make sure it's all inclusive.
Absolutely.
You just don't do one without the others, a combination of all of it, especially that professional help, because they know what they're doing, so most people that go to them on a regular basis come out in good shape. So, any other last words you'd like to say, Tisha, before we sign off?
No, I thank you so much for having me, Mr. Overton. And, anybody that is watching, anybody that needs us, even in the process right now of me forming the nonprofit, I'm always willing to help. I'm always willing to give a resource. I have plenty of them. So reach out to me on the website and I can see what I can do for you.
Okay, it's a nonprofit that you're building. Is there any way that people that might want to contribute to that nonprofit can do that?
They can do that through the website. There's a donation button there.
Excuse me. Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot, and appreciate everybody for watching. We'll see you next time on the Slim Nation One-on-Ones podcast. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. See you.
It's time for us to sit down at the table and turn this chaos into something stable. For love, one-on-one. We will not accept defeat, not on our land, not in our streets. Getting it done. Reaching out to save the youth, letting them know the truth. Slim Nation is where good conversations dwell. Positive affirmations where make a strong nation. Slim Nation is where